Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel YNR Daily Spoiler. Game over, Clary. Harrison arrives with proof that changes everything.
Claire, the game is over. Harrison appears with proof, and Kyle demands answers. As Claire moved across the room, her trainers made a soft, distinctive sound, the kind of step that showed you had rehearsed both your script and your smile. Beside her was the press release she had written for the stockholders, a neat, business-like document that made an effort to look both contrite and authoritative. She had no idea that the tidy, powerful item she was going to turn in would be the tiniest part of a day that would completely upend the remainder of her life. Harrison came in a suit. He was not anticipated. You could sense it as soon as he entered, like a single cold breeze discovering a seam in a coat. Everybody raised their heads from their notes. Those who knew him nodded in the quick-eyed way that men with a history of trouble tend to do. Harrison only had a manila folder and a suspicious look on his face. Kyle's expression was a series of whispered questions. On this day, he didn't want to deal with anything else. Managing a business and trying to love across corporate boundaries had been a journey of compromise in their marriage. Claire had endured hardships alongside him. She had been both his business associate and his life companion, which required so much tact that at times it seemed as though she was a human ambassador. Harrison, Claire said in a cheerful, businesslike voice. What is the cause of our surprise? As though it were a verdict, Harrison placed the envelope on the table. He explained to them, because the people in this room should know what their partner has been doing. He clenched his teeth. Because Kyle deserves to know the truth. The space slanted inward. Kyle tensed his jaw. He questioned, the truth about what? He didn't ask out of interest. With the tautness of a man who already feared the answer, he asked. In the same way that poison is spread across a bar, Harrison's gloved fingers moved a piece of paper aside and slid a USB drive across the table. I have recordings of financial transfers and communications, some of which are very recent, and they are all connected to Claire's accounts, he clarified. Eyes shifted. Half the tabloids would find an Abbott in the middle of a controversy alluring, while the families inside would be devastated. You're mistaken, Claire said before Harrison could reply again. You've got it wrong. She anchored herself because panic makes people reckless, and reckless people make mistakes that Harrison can use as leverage. Claire saw what needed to be watched, the growing panic, like a shadow-consuming color. Claire's forced smile was cut by Kyle's word. Explain. It had the sharp edge of a man who had been patient, but not forever. Kyle stood like a fist on a hot coal. The sound of Claire's distinctive voice on a late-night phone call filled the room as Harrison hit play on a small recorder. Get it done, she said. Make sure the accounts reflect the donations. Verify that the documentation appears to be from the Newman Foundation. No questions asked. The murmur that followed was a living thing. Reflexively, Claire's hand went to the folder. That's doctored, she clarified. I never. Harrison raised another gadget. This is from a transfer record, he clarified. Payments were made from a Swiss account to a shell company connected to Newman Acquisitions. According to bank screens, the metadata checks out. For the first time, Claire's voice faltered and the business mask broke. You have no way of linking those transfers to me. Any idiot can plant a name. Harrison didn't smile. Avoiding letting idiots plant things had been the foundation of his life. A shadow server records your IP address at those timestamps. Emails were sent to unofficial addresses. Texts were erased but recoverable. I double-checked it, Claire. As if someone were striking a drum, Kyle felt blood in his ears. Each new piece of information was worth a pound. So you're saying I'm involved? He inquired. That my business, my name. Harrison said. The strange thing is that you weren't involved. It sounds like deliberate sabotage. I think someone tried to give the impression that you were complicit. The primary offender is using your wife's access, which is the only challenge. Would you like me to be the autumn girl? Claire asked, laughing a little in fear. She stopped because there was more on the recorder. Harrison pressed his finger so firmly on the small player that the sound became distorted. More of Claire's voice. Private, intimate, setting up trades, favors, and the small deals that ruin reputations. You're not listening, Claire said, her edge sharp. She went over to the table, located the drive, and took it. I don't know what game you think you're playing, Harrison. There was no game in Harrison's eyes. I'm not playing anything, he clarified. Kyle, you used your position to approve donation letters that were never delivered to the intended recipients. Why would you risk it? I am providing proof. You approve transfers that enrich the wealthy at the expense of households. Claire was enclosed in a cramped space. She was breathing heavily. She experienced the excitement of being acknowledged for a version of herself that she had been cultivating for years. A woman who could change markets with a single statement and make a living by rewriting stories. If there was a crack, she had successfully covered it up. But now the crack has a voice. Kyle touched the side of his face. If any of this is true, why would Claire do it? Why should she? Claire, tell me this isn't true, he said, staring at her as though an equation had gone wrong. Claire sat down heavily and said, I can explain, but it sounded like a prelude to confession, which wasn't what Abbott's family needed to hear. Her eyes had a quality Kyle hadn't noticed, tired brilliance, like a chess player trapped. She couldn't maintain her prepared tempo indefinitely. Human rhythm slips when the stakes are high. Harrison's devices had caused damage. His playback had been wire and data, but it had unlocked an emotional sluice. There were side chats and muttered strings in the room, with legal counsel in the back fixing ties, and an assistant erasing emails like a worried surgeon. We'll need to bring in lawyers if you've been shifting money, manipulating donors, or fabricating paperwork, Claire, Kyle said, pressing his hand against the table, as if the words themselves would anchor him. Accounts must be frozen, and the board must be informed. Claire's expression changed from fearful to hostile. You'll do what your father wants you to do, she said. The way he throws anyone who is inconvenient. You'll throw me to the wolves. No, Kyle firmly retorted. I'll act morally. I won't let you involve the Abbotts in a scandal. Devon, who had always been the tallest person in such circumstances, stable and sensible, entered the boardroom at that precise moment, striking a balance between family and guidance. His expression tightened as he saw the table and the equipment. What's going on? He inquired. Something's been set up to look like Claire was setting up the Newman Foundation, Harrison told me, passing Devon a drive as if he were passing up a puzzle. But the truth is messier than that. If there are fraudulent documents and unauthorized transfers, our primary responsibility is fiduciary, Devon said, pushing back his chair and looking at the evidence through the eyes of his attorney. The accounts are frozen. We conduct audits. We need to protect the company and its investors if Claire did this. We must locate and reveal the plant if she didn't. Claire, he started, his voice lacking business cadence, explain. Kyle listened, overwhelmed by the legal language, which felt both personal and professional in one cruel slice. I was trying to fix something, she said, crumpling inward like crushed paper. I tried to protect us, she said. I questioned if what are we protected from? From reputation? Kyle commanded. From your own history? Claire, tell me straight out that you didn't approve the transfers. I didn't authorize them, she clarified, but I did authorize some measures, not transfers. Her eyes were wet, but there was a stubbornness in them that could be interpreted as strength or defiance. I approved the board's contingency measures for donor privacy. These are typical. My credentials are being used by someone to give the impression that I am the one using fictitious charities to launder money. Harrison intervened with proof, complicating the simplicity of denial. There are messages from a burner number, said the worker. It employs the same language as Claire. The timing of these messages is peculiar, though. They line up with occasions when Claire was present in public with you, Kyle, at events. Whoever is planting this is trying to give the impression that someone close enough to mimic Claire's voice pattern forged her signature. The room tilted, and Kyle felt it. So this person wants us to think Claire is corrupt even though she isn't? His remarks had the fragile edge of someone trying to use logic to save his marriage. Harrison said, there's a motive for discrediting Claire in high places. There's also suspicion that someone with access to internal schedules could time things to make Claire appear absent and later prove that the messages, which were supposedly sent at those times, were actually produced remotely. Devon's attorney looked like a man assessing risk. That would imply a breach internal to us, he told me. Someone who knows our schedules, who can spoof IP addresses, who knows how to mimic Claire's phrasing. In Genoa City, where loyalty is the currency and reputations are the battlegrounds, enemies often hide behind friends' access. So the charge hung heavy in the room because it meant someone else. Someone who wanted power, saw Claire as a threat, and had the technical know-how. Kyle sounded agitated when he said, "Who?" he inquired. Harrison looked at Claire as though he were looking at a map showing where the river had been contaminated. "There's an X from Claire's past," he whispered. "Someone she believed she had left behind. Then there's a board member who stands to benefit significantly if the Abbotts lose leverage with the Newmans. And there are family rivals who want to gain a foothold." "Stop with the riddles," Claire shouted. "Name names." Like a man closing a case file, Harrison shut his mouth and then opened it again. A deposit was made to a shell company connected to Victor's holding group last month after Lucas and Phyllis contacted an anonymous broker. This could be a coincidence, or it could be the anchor. "Are you implying my family could be behind this?" Kyle asked, his head swimming with the names Victor, Phyllis, and Lucas, each of whom had a past as heavy as a ledger. He made a demand. "No," Devin firmly retorted. "I'm implying that there are people who might profit. We need more proof before we can accuse someone. Harrison, we require a trail of the IP, the phone, and the server from which it originated. Timestamps that are cross-referenced with security cameras are necessary." Harrison was there because he had already done that. "I did," he clarified, "but there's more. Take a look at this." He moved a surveillance photo across the table. It showed a woman pulling a hoodie up to her face in the dark outside a donor event. It resembled the grainy evidence found in low-budget thrillers. However, there was a reflection of a car's license plate next to her, like an inadvertent identifier. Harrison had circled the numbers. Kyle merely gazed. The license plate is associated with a vehicle registered under a corporate shell company that was previously known to have small contracts with Newman Enterprises. It was a small gesture that had a huge impact. Envelopes became daggers as a result of the way business and personal life intersected. Kyle's hand shook. "If this is true," he retorted, "if Claire is being set up, then whoever did this wants to kill us. They intended to break down our house and take advantage." "That's what sticks out to me," Harrison said softly. "Someone is attempting to destabilize your marriage and the firm in order to free up space to move. This isn't petty sabotage. Someone is attempting to shift ownership maps. Who gains from Kyle Abbott's weakness?" Claire had been trying to keep her breathing normal, but now it had hitched. "It was like opening a door you'd prefer to keep locked," she asked. "The Newmans," he declared, "or any competing company," Devin said, turning his attention to the men seated at the table. Family friends, rivals, and citizens of Genoa City who use power as a common currency. It might, however, also be an internal coup. Those who wish to impose restructuring within the company. Just as a man would build defenses as the sand moved under his feet, Kyle's imagination raced. "We pull the accounts, we bring in investigators, we restrict all access," he informed the crew. "Anything I've authorized that could be used as a lever is cut off." Harrison gave a nod. "And we discover who planted the disc and who initially reported the transfers. There is always a first action, a paper trail that starts a chain reaction. Locate that, cut the chain, and we will be able to identify the perpetrator." In the face of a wild confession, the boardroom erupted into a flurry of activity, with people turning to their phones, laptops, and dull activities that seemed to accomplish something. Claire slumped back, feeling hollow, but strangely clear. The evidence revealed something she'd been trying to hide, even from herself. She'd become someone who thinks in contingencies. This did not excuse the fact that someone could use her as a scapegoat, but it did color the moral landscape in complicated ways. That evening, Claire and Kyle went back to the Abbott home alone. Their home was a glass and stone statement of intent, designed for comfort and aesthetics, but the silence between them was unlike anything they had ever known. It was colder than marble and heavier than decor. Kyle walked past the door and settled into a chair, as though his body could sustain him while his mind raced. Kyle finally said, "You didn't tell me everything," in a brief statement. Claire said, "You didn't ask the right questions," which wasn't really an apology or a defense. "I thought I could protect you by managing risk." His reply was, "You moved in areas you wouldn't even let me see." The old tenderness had an ember beneath the ash. "You managed risks you had no right to manage," he said. "I'm sorry," Claire muttered, her face furrowed. "I never wanted to put you or the company in danger." "You put us in danger," he said. "You put us in this." Words like trust, loyalty, and secrecy were thrown around like tiny, sharp objects as they argued in a way that only years of cohabitation allow, with the intention of being heard rather than winning. Eventually, compassion found its way between the harsh edges. Kyle saw Claire more realistically as a woman trying to make a living in a society where everything is leveraged. Claire saw Kyle as a fractured mirror, half family, part executive, and entirely human. Harrison presented additional evidence the following morning, including CCTV footage from a parking garage, a voice recording altered to sound like Claire's laughter after confirming a transfer, and a bank official's testimony that an agent had asked them to reroute cash. The case was built on moments that, when correctly assembled, would create the ideal crime scene in Claire's name. However, nothing they said could change the ledger that Harrison had opened. Harrison then dropped the last piece, which was a voicemail from two unidentified numbers debating collateral damage. Among their vocabulary was a phrase that meant game over and was repeated as a covert ritual. "Game over, Claire," a voice growled. The sentences sounded like a verdict. For once, Kyle had to be the one to demand clarification. He asked Harrison the question he had been thinking about. Who stands to gain the most from making Claire the antagonist? Harrison gave a circumspect reply. Someone with the means to launch a smear campaign akin to a corporate raid. Someone who thinks a weakened Abbott equals new opportunities. Someone wants what you have, Kyle. Claire, who had previously masterminded social narratives, had been undone by a narrative written for her by someone else. She sat in the center, like a character in a play whose lines had been hijacked mid-scene. The implication hung over the room like a rain cloud, blurring the line between family and business, leaving everything vulnerable. Kyle grew steadily. "We will find out who said game over," he vowed. "We'll figure out who planted the evidence." He spoke with the authority of someone making a decision. "We will do everything correctly, legally, and publicly." In the soap opera of Genoa City, Claire looked up at him with tears in her eyes. This was not the end, not even a verdict. Rather, it was the beginning of something brutally honest and essential. The hunt for the person who had whispered game over into their lives. A few hours later, Harrison and Kyle stood outside the Abbott residence in the early evening for a moment of truth, while investigators searched through financial records and the company put emergency firewalls in place. The sun was setting behind the horizon like a sealing wax, and for once, the city seemed to be willing to forgive people for their wrongdoings if they were honest enough to admit them. "You did the right thing by bringing this forward," Kyle said quietly now, not being polite but cautious. "If we can prove you're right, there will be justice. If you are wrong, I'm not wrong," was Harrison's straightforward response. "But the only thing I can assure you of is the veracity of the evidence I possess." Kyle's hand met Claire's across the table, like a man anchoring himself. "Then find the truth," he said. "And make sure, Harrison, that the person who believed they could put an end to us with a whisper learns what it means to pick a fight with the Abbotts." Harrison gave a nod that was almost like a tiny bow. "Game over, Claire," he said, cutting into the night with a challenge rather than a farewell. Let's see who wrote the script. Both corporate procedure and personal retaliation were now underway. Scandals rarely result in death in Genoa City. Instead, they act as a launching pad for new identities. Who turned the page and what the ink said were crucial. After they left, Claire was left alone for a considerable amount of time, with the only sound in the house being the faint ticking of a clock. She couldn't tell if she had been cunning or careless because she had been disassembled and reassembled so many times. Harrison offered damning evidence, but it was faulty. It was possible to confuse her own secrets for guilt. Lack of timing can make the difference between saving yourself and condemning someone else in a city where morality is ambiguous. The lights of Genoa City flickered in the distance like tiny witnesses, ready to devour and prolong a scandal. The game was over, according to Harrison. Everyone in the house, though, interpreted the proclamation differently. Kyle interpreted it as an exhortation to defend and defend. Claire had to decide whether to enter or exit a queue. Harrison saw it as a mission. In the darkness outside, a phone buzzed. Someone let out a brittle laugh and said, "They're on to us," into the darkness. The game was far from over.